Hello everyone, Turner Burner here with another video for you guys. First thing, I want to thank you for allowing this Clayton master video solo run to get to 1,000 views. As of right now, it's my most watched solo run. And I told you guys last week that in the description it said that if this hits 1,000 views, I would do a detailed analysis of the solo run to help you guys either complete the map or do it solo with Clayton, or whatever character you want to use solo. These tips in this video will help you. Right now, what I'm going to do is going to be very different from any of my other voiceovers. So basically, what will happen is if there's a moment I think is more critical than others, I will pause and analyze that moment. That way I'm not glossing over anything important. And, I want to make sure that you get, the maximum amount of this analysis video. Other analysis videos, I basically just had the gameplay live and I would just talk about it without pausing it. But I feel like this one is especially tough. So I want to be very, very thorough as I get into this video. So I'll segment it off into chapters. That way you can go back to a certain situation whenever you want to, if you miss something and things of that nature. So without further ado, let's get right into it. So the skill cards I use, because some of you guys ask this almost every single solo run, and I don't always show it, is Soul Survivor, Heavy Capacity, Serrated Edge, Reflex Shredder, and Heavy Shell. So those are the skills I use in most of my Clayton solo runs. The one I would change some from here and there is Serrated Edge. So, all right. So for Clayton on the Gatekeepers, the only possible spawn in the very beginning is if it's Salvo Scion and Mulcher Scion. If you don't have Salvo and Mulcher, you honestly just have to reload the map until you do. It's the only spawn where you can use projectiles, or he can use his ultimate to kill both enemies at once. So first thing, you want to get Overkill and Sniper, and then you want to go to your left and get one of the blue boxes. This will allow you to shoot the Scions through the little gaping hole. So here's one thing I want to touch on right here. So when you open the door, you're not going to pass through the door, because if you pass through the door, you will trigger other enemies outside of just the Scions. This first segment in this video, you want to just trigger the Salvo and Mulcher Scions so you can ult them both at the same time. So one thing I discovered through a lot of attempts is the Salvo, other gameplay as well. The Salvo Scion is probably the slowest moving Scion of the Scions. So you want to trigger the Salvo Scion first, and then the Mulcher Scion. The Mulcher Scion is probably the fastest, and you could argue that the Cryo is a little bit faster than the Mulcher, but it's between the Mulcher and the Cryo that's the fastest. But anyway, between the Mulcher and the Salvo Scion, the Mulcher is much faster. So you want to trigger the Salvo Scion first, shoot them through the little triangle holes, and then shoot the Mulcher Scion. You can shoot them anywhere as long as you hit them. And then while they're coming towards you, you're going to load up your ammo. So now that they're both triggered, I have time to concurrently load up ammo, get this shock, and my ult's already charged because it charges every 52, 53 seconds. So by the time I get the ammo box, they are pretty much almost all the way there. I marked the Mulcher just so I can see where he's at through the wall. So here's another critical point right here. You see how I am favoring closer to the Mulcher versus favoring close to the Salvo? If I were to get closer to the Salvo Scion is going to definitely charge me. and try to, punch me. That is obviously not ideal because it doesn't help me kill the Salvo Scion when I'm in my ultimate. So I realized that I need to get closer to, but not past that barrier of the Mulcher Scion. So what I need to do is get close to the Mulcher Scion and as far away from Salvo Scion as possible to make sure they both definitely shoot. The Mulcher Scion almost never charges me. I don't think it's ever happened when I was doing these attempts. So that's very, very useful to know that while you're doing these. That way you can maximize your ultimate in the first try. Alright, so I turn on my ultimate, let them both shoot at me, and then I pass through the barrier, which will then trigger the next set of enemies. So the next set of enemies could be, and it's important to know RNG spawns when you are doing these solo runs so you know which character to use and things of that nature, but the spawns after the two Scions are either going to be Grenadiers, two sets of Grenadiers and Juvies, or a set of drones and then a set of drones and Juvies. So it's better to have the drones spawn because they come with less Juvies and the drones have less health than the Grenadiers, elite Grenadiers. This is critical to know because you're going to use Salvo Scion shots on the first set of drones. That way you're using less ammo, and then when you're loading up the salvo in the weapons locker, you don't have to wait there as long because you haven't used as much ammo. And with the Elite Grenadier spawn, you're using almost twice as much because they come with Juvies and Elite Grenadiers, so it's more enemies and higher health main enemies when you're talking about Elite Grenadier versus the drones. So you're going to tap the Salvo Scion shot. You're not going to spam it because you don't want to waste Salvo Scion or Salvo Scion. You don't want to waste Salvo shots when you shooting the drones because you don't want to wait at the weapons locker too long. So you're just going to. I have my Clayton max, so it's at 28. So we're just going to wait till it hits the 43, and we're going to do everything we can to kill the next set of drones and Juvies. It's 2 drones and 4 Juvies. Overkills for the Juvies, and my ultimate is for the drones. So I fall back here because I'm never quite sure where those drones are going to be, and I want to pull them all the way over here. So I just used my overkill to knock out these Juvies. So I wait at this corner to pull both drones inside of this little barrier. Now, I'm going to use my ultimate. I have a choice here. If I don't have my ultimate, I can use the sniper rifle, but I typically have my ultimate in this situation. So once they're pulled inside of the doorway, both of them, I use my ultimate, and just in case one of them's not shooting at me, which can happen, I shut the door on them. That way they're no longer in the game. So by this point, since I didn't use that much salvo, and I had a decent amount of salvo before I put on the weapons locker, the salvo should be at 43, which it is, which is pretty early. If you look at the timestamp, it's 2 minutes and 22 seconds. The latest you can be there waiting for the salvo sign, or I keep saying salvo sign, the 2 minutes and 22 seconds, the latest you can be there without waiting for the salvo to fill up is 3 minutes and 30 seconds. So we're way ahead of schedule here. And my ultimate's probably about 30 seconds from being charged again, which will be good for the next section. So we're just going to get blue boxes. We don't need a ton of ammo because it's really about the salvo and the ultimate eventually. And I got the frag earlier because there's no other time to get frags the rest of the game. So I just use it for after the safe room. So same thing as before. This is the second section, I would say. You don't want to, same thing as before. You don't want to pass the doorway. You want to trigger the Sentinel and Guardian and have them come closer to you. Now, what you may be tempted to do, let me get the angle first. which you may be tempted to do right. Actually, let me go back a little bit.
Here we go. I'm reloading.
Let's see. What you may be tempted to do right about here is shooting at the Sentinel and Guardian. You don't want to do that because in all likelihood you'll hit one of the walls in front of you, or the pillar in front of you, or the small red or small square box in front of you. You want to make sure that in these solo runs you don't want to get in the habit of wasting ammo. You're not, unless you are a Keegan. You have to be very frugal and very efficient with everything you do in these solo runs. Once I run out of 43 shots, that's it until I either get to a weapons locker or get the salvo, in this context, off the Sentinel. So I need to be very smart with how I use my salvo shots here. In other attempts, shooting through that little narrow way is not ideal, but I will show you later on in this little segment what is ideal for your salvo shots. So we're just going to use sniper shots to lower their health some. It doesn't do much, but it does do something as opposed to nothing. So right now I'm waiting for the Sentinel to get all the way to the right, and I'll show you the exact spot I want these two enemies before I do anything. Okay, see right here? This is the exact location. That way is the best angle and the most accurate angle I can use to get my salvo shots off. Which allows me to hit the Sentinel, and then when the Guardian eventually goes there, I'm able to do the same. In a perfect world, they're both over there. That way I can do damage to both of them. But, in this game, this segment wasn't like the best one per se, but is the one that ended up being in the win. But that little narrow way I was able to do like probably 95% accuracy on the Sentinel or Guardian. So this little narrow way is probably the best way to use salvo shots on these two mini bosses. So just keep that in mind for when you are doing this as a team with Salvo or solo run as Clayton and even Keegan perhaps. So I'm just going to use Salvo all the way until the Sentinel dies. The Sentinel in my other attempts has been a bigger problem than the Guardian, so I want the Sentinel to die first. So I used 29 of my 43 shots on the Guardian, which isn't ideal. I'd rather use, half or less. So I try to use Reflect Shredder on the Guardian, but he's not accurate himself, intentionally or otherwise. So it doesn't do much to kill the Guardian. So same thing as before, the Venom is creeping up a little bit, but we still have a little bit of time. We're waiting for the Guardian to get all the way to the right, and then that's when we're going to strike. We may do sniper shots here, but they're not really going to be, big deals as far as killing the Guardian. It's really about the salvo and Reflex Shredder if we can get it. But yeah, the Guardian's just posted up behind something. Not sure why I shot there, but so now the Guardian's in a position where I want him to be. Ult's almost charged. Now it's completely charged, and we're just going to empty the salvo into the Guardian. And while there's no shield, we're going to get these active headshots as quickly as possible. And now the Guardian and Sentinel are dead. So the empty salvo doesn't matter because I'm going to get more salvo. Okay, so this next segment is important because I just passed the doorway, right? And I said before, once you pass those doorways, it triggers everything else in this room. So we got Deadeyes and Peacemakers. And because of the regen penalty, they're going to kill me really fast even after I get, damage and cover. So I need to be very, very careful here. So again, in a perfect world, but when it comes down to these solo runs, you take it however you can get it. The salvo, the Sentinel died at the top of the stairs. Ideally, the salvo is at the bottom of the stairs. That way I have a faster transition and I don't have to walk up and down. But because the Sentinel died at the top of the stairs, it's a little bit dicey because it's literally right in front of the Peacemaker and Deadeye spawn, or at least one of them. I believe there's two spawns in this room where they come from. So I have to be careful that I get the salvo because I need the salvo for the LZ. That's the only purpose for the salvo in this gameplay, is to have it for the LZ. So I need to get the salvo quickly and then pop my ult when I think it's necessary to then get to the safe room. So I get the salvo here. I get kind of nervous, so I pop my ult there, which is a little early, but it worked out. See, I'd rather have my ult right about here. That way these Deadeyes don't, shoot their M-bar at me, because they're usually 100% accurate, but in this context, they were missing their shots, which works for me. Sometimes it's better to be lucky than good. So another tip here I want to touch on as we get to the safe room is once you close this door, do not drop any of your weapons. There was one stint where I dropped my sniper and overkill, and because I didn't want them for after the I don't want to miss anything, so I'll pause it. I didn't want them for after the because I don't need the sniper and overkill after the safe room. I only need the salvo and really my reflex shredder for the most part. So I was trying to get rid of it just so it was easier to pick up other weapons like boom shot or torque bow if I needed to. But what happened was when I respawned, because I didn't get it on the first try, I didn't have salvo either. So you want to be careful about dropping your weapon once you close the safe room door, because you may not have salvo afterwards. So just be careful about that. Another thing I want to touch on before you see it, in case you noticed it earlier, is there's a Clayton glitch where So how I noticed it is, and I noticed it on other Clayton runs, is if he's holding his salvo, let's say Clayton does his ultimate, and he's holding his salvo, and enemies are bleeding while he's holding the salvo. Let's say once the ultimate ends and other enemies are shooting at him, he will still get healing from the bleeding enemies that he had while the ultimate was going. So just keep that in mind. If you want to utilize that for Clayton solo runs that on maps that have salvo. That can be very useful. That way you get a little bit more extra life after your ultimate, which allows you to remain immortal. So, all right. So the two spawns you can get after the safe room is you can get the Matriarch, then the Swarmak, or you get the Snatcher, then the Swarmak. When it comes down to it, you rather the Snatcher, and you're about to see why here in a second if you haven't already seen that video. But for some reason, I don't know if it's a glitch or if the game put like an Easter egg there or something, I don't know. You're able to chainsaw the sorry, not the Swarmak. That'd be nice though. You're able to chainsaw the Snatcher for some reason. So I'm not the first person to discover this, but I did see those videos of the person who discovered it. So same thing as before. You want to trigger the boss without passing the door to open the doorway. Basically, you open the door, but you don't pass through the doorway. Those doorways work as trigger points to attract the regular enemies. So one thing I want to touch on here, because some people can and can't do this. So in my attempts, what I discovered was when you trigger the Snatcher, right? And then you hide behind this particular barrier. For some reason, I don't know exactly why, the Snatcher is drawn to either your approximate ult location or your general location, but it's never drawn to the exact position you're actually at. So when you shoot at the door button and then go over here, the orientation of the Snatcher still will end up facing where you press the button or where you shot him with the Lancer to trigger him forward. So keep that in mind when you see this next segment. So the Snatcher comes, it's oriented away from me. You see how he's oriented? He doesn't even know where I'm at somehow. And then I just chainsaw him, then I pop my ult. If I don't pop my ult and he stomps once, I'm going to get down and I'm going to have to do this all over again. So, and another thing I want to touch on is you only have 2 hours to do this, even with Iron Man, because the frame rate starts to drop pretty substantially. I don't think I mentioned that earlier in the video. So, all right, so I'm not going to pass the doorway just yet. I want to wait for my ult. And then one thing I want to touch on again is when you're dealing with these solo runs, you have to be as efficient as possible. When you're dealing with 3-person teams, because you have so much more, whether it's Keegan or whatever, you have so much more aid. You don't have to be as efficient. You don't have to make, the best decisions all the time. But with these solo runs, because it's just you have to figure out when you can skip enemies, when you can skip sections, when you can skip ammo rooms. These are details you have to pay attention to because you only have so much time before, hypothetically, the venom's too fast, the doors start closing, things of that nature. So you need to be very, very smart and economical with your decision making. So what I do here, I realize I only need to kill the Snatcher because that's the only gatekeeper for this section. So I wait for my ultimate to come, and then I'm going to essentially skip as much of the second round of enemies as I can and all of the third round of enemies before I get to that supply room and shutting the door. Once I pop my ult, I'll maintain immortality, and I'll be able to get to the supply room very, very safely. So you'll see that here in a second. So right now I'm just waiting for my ult to charge. It's pretty fast, so you're not waiting a whole lot of time. Clayton's a really, really excellent character when he's solo like this because getting your ult every 52 to 53 seconds, kind of like how he was in the beginning, before they fixed him. He's just very, very fun to play. So you want to pop your ult as late as possible. That way you can use it to get as close, so you can get to as close to the supply room as possible. So you're gonna wait till you take a significant amount of damage, then pop your ult, then go. And I take one more shot here. You see that healing right here? That's just because I'm holding a salvo and then another enemy's bleeding. So that's the glitch I'm talking about with Clayton. It doesn't come up a ton. It comes up a good amount in solo runs, but it doesn't come up a ton in 3-person games because he doesn't have his ult that much. So in this room, we have 2 red boxes, and those are the only boxes that really matter. So similar to before, so here's what we're dealing with. The last gatekeeper is the Swarmak. From the LZ spawns the Swarmak and 3 poppers. You don't want to go too far because you'll trigger the elite snipers as well. You kind of want the elite snipers to almost not be paying attention when you eventually make it to the LZ. So, but when we open this door and when we pass through the door, the Swarmak will be alerted. As long as we're staying past through this door, the Swarmak's going to keep coming forward. I plant a grenade there just to help out with the popper situation. But as long as I'm staying out here, the Swarmak's going to keep, walking up forward. Or towards me, I should say. So my ult's charged again. So what my goal here is just to, when the Swarmak starts shooting at me and I start taking damage, I pop my ult. Popper is going to come from my left. And just to err on the side of caution, you always want to jump away from the popper because they will traject towards you sometimes. The Swarmak is here. I take damage, then I pop my ult. So one thing I want to touch on here, this is the perfect situation when it comes down to Clayton versus a Swarmak. I can't replicate the situation intentionally. Sometimes he shoots missiles. Sometimes he gets closer and growls. There is just no way of knowing what the Swarmak is going to do 100% of the time. But when you do get these situations to where he's shooting these guns, you just got to take advantage of them. Just take advantage of every opportunity when you're in these solo runs. So when it comes down to also Clayton's ultimate, as you can see there, how it recharged like that. But one thing I want to touch on is you don't want to stick around too long when Clayton is in his ultimate. When there's like half a second remaining before he's now mortal again, you want to jump away to the left or right, or depending on the context, and not take any more damage. With the Swarmak specifically, because he's such a high health enemy, you're going to get so much bleeding that you're going to recharge your ultimate super fast. It's actually ended up being almost instant every time I went up against the Swarmak. So I was able to get back-to-back ultimates. So yeah, a popper just coming up on my right, so we'll just play this out. So Swarmak shoots me again. I'm not concerned about the popper. except that second popper may pop a little late, but ultimate almost charges all the way again, and then we bleed out the Swarmak. So that's probably one of the more efficient ways to kill the Swarmak compared to any other possible way you can kill the Swarmak. So Clayton, very good character, especially by himself. So we're going to wait till his ultimate charges all the way again. We are way ahead of the Venom, as you can see by the bottom right of your screen. So what's critical here is just getting used to movements, right? So you want to take as straight a path to the LZ as possible. So you want to go down to the right, then make a left, and then go on that main floor with all the elite snipers. Those elite snipers are not alerted, so they're not ready. Like they're not like hard aiming at you yet. They're just standing still because we didn't go all the way forward and trigger them. So we kind of stayed up here, which allowed us to focus on the little bit of poppers and the Swarmak, and that was it. So that was very, very useful to make this situation much easier. So my goal here is to go to the right or left, doesn't really matter, and then just bolt straight to the LZ. I'll have my ultimate, so I'll be able to have some sort of security. So remember the Sentinel from earlier, the 24 shots I got from the Sentinel, I never used it, so I still have it. The Sentinel that I killed in the second section of this game, and I'll separate this off in the comment section or the description, but in the Sentinel I killed in the description, in the game, those salvo shots were specifically for the LZ because other attempts I had boom shot only or flashes or frags, and it wasn't enough. I needed more shots or more health to deal with the LZ enemies because there's a ton of juvies that come sometimes, and grenadiers, elite snipers, elite drones sometimes. You just got to be careful. The salvo also allows me to get, because of my passive, I'm able to get healing. So every salvo shot, if I'm taking damage or if I have damage, it heals me some. And that's very, very useful when it comes down to Clayton, which technically isn't a high health character. And you're dealing with the regen penalty, so you just have to be careful in those situations. So right now I'm just going to go make a right and then go to make a left and go straight to the LZ. So my ult's here. I don't move as fast with the salvo, obviously, but that's okay. There's an elite drone right to the right that I just have to ignore. And then I'm going to pop my ult at the last possible second. When you're dealing with this section right here, my general rule of thumb with Clayton, because the ultimate's not very, very long, so you want to maximize it. My general rule with Clayton is you don't pop your ultimate until you're starting to take damage. But when you're dealing with elite snipers, elite drones, elite grenadiers, and juvies all at the same time, you kind of want to err on the side of caution. There was another attempt, I think it was like the one before this one, actually. I waited a little too long, and elite grenadier nicked me, and then I got one melee dead from a juvie, because a juvie has a melee that's like 95. It takes you down to like 5% health. So if you have any sort of damage and then you get a juvie melee, you're just down. So you just have to, when you're dealing with juvies, jumping off walls, you just got to be careful when you're making it to the LZ. And then I know there's a juvie on my tail, so instead of pulling the lever immediately, I shoot that juvie, then I pull the lever, and then I tap salvo. I don't spam it because I know I need it for the whole LZ time. It takes 30 seconds for these doors to close. So I see a juvie, I kill a juvie. It's simple as that. If I see an elite sniper or elite grenadier, and because I'm doing damage, I'm charging my ult quicker than like the normal 52 seconds. So I probably got about 10-15 seconds before it goes away, and I just use my ult on these elite grenadiers. I throw my one frag, and I prematurely celebrate right here, and I want to actually go into that. Two mistakes I made in the last 5 minutes. So earlier in the previous supply room, there are 2 red boxes. Actually, it could have been game losing mistake. I should have gotten both red boxes. I had one frag, and then I got a second frag by getting one. Then I planted the frag, and I should have gotten, after I killed the Swarmak, gotten another red box to get a second frag. It would have been smoother to use at the end when a popper and a juvie sneaks through the doors. Another mistake I made was when I had my ultimate, I didn't consistently stand in the middle of the doorway. I don't know why. I guess I was just being too cautious. I don't know why. And then I didn't make sure that all the enemies were dead, and I prematurely celebrated. I thought the game was over, but 2 game enders actually got through. But luckily, I was careful and still got the win. But when you're in these solo runs, you want to make sure that you're not squandering opportunities, because it's hard. It's really hard to recreate ideal situations, because in reality, you're not supposed to be able to do solo runs. And also, when it comes down to the supply rooms, make sure you get all the ammo you need, regardless of if you're a Cole or a Lonnie, or regardless of character. You want to get as much ammo as you need, because it's not like you're taking from any other character. It's just you. So, like, if you get all the sniper or all the overkill, you're not hurting, like, Foz or Kate. It's just you. So, highly recommend in these solo runs if you have time, because there's different situations where you don't have time, to make sure you maximize every supply room to your advantage. All right, so we're dealing with 2 more enemies, and I just have to be careful here. The popper starts to detonate, so I just make sure I run as fast as possible and then get behind this barrier to protect myself. And then I remember I have a Lancer, and I remember from my Paddock solo run that if I'm doing the chainsaw animation, juvies just fall back, and then I just chainsaw the juvie. So that is pretty much it, guys. If you have any questions on this solo run, I'll just do a quick recap right here. So in the beginning, you want to get sniper and overkill. Okay, so when you're dealing with those 2 weapons, the overkill is for the early juvies. The sniper is mainly to either headshot the drones, early grenadiers, and trigger the Scions towards you. Okay, you don't want to pass the doorway of that first section until both Scions are dead. Okay, you want to, when you're doing your ultimate, you want to get closer to the Mulcher Scion, because the Salvo Scion is going to definitely charge you. All right, so you kill both those enemies, and then the Salvo Scion is your best friend, basically, or the Salvo weapon is your best friend, basically. So you want to use that to get kills. The first segment of enemies will either be Elite Grenadiers or Juvies, or drones, or just drones. Now, if you get Grenadiers and Juvies, it's fine. It'll take more salvo shots, but you still can win the game. Drones take less health, and they don't come with an extra round of Juvies. That is the much more ideal spawn. So just to let you guys know, I got drones. So I got drones for the first set enemies after the Scions, and then I got drones and Juvies after that. Use my ultimate on the drones and use overkill for the Juvies. The second section, I open the door. I don't pass the doorway because it triggers everything else. The Sentinel and Guardian. I make sure they get all the way to the right pathway, and you can go back in the video to look at that, the right pathway, so I can use my salvo shots on the Sentinel Guardian. It allows it to be, in my estimation, it's more accurate than any other way you can shoot those Sentinel and Guardian. Your ultimate's not going to be the best thing, because for some reason they will either not shoot or stop shooting when you pop your ultimate. So that's just something to keep in mind when you're doing that section. So it's really about the salvo, and then when the shields are down, using sniper when you can. Okay, so you get the salvo, go to the safe room. If you get the matriarch, you're going to need to get find torque bow on that level. But if you get Snatcher, just use the tips you saw to chainsaw the Snatcher. Trigger him and then hide behind a corner and then chainsaw. That would be my advice to do that. Wait till you get your ultimate again. Go through that section on the left side, pop your ultimate at the last second, and then get all the way to the supply room and shut the door. If you have 1 or 2 frags, it'll depend on how you played the game. You can get a red box to plant a frag, so you can kill at least one of the poppers. You're going to use your ultimate. At best, you can use your ultimate as little as twice. and as many times as 4 times in my experience when it comes down to killing the Swarmak. So it depends on how he shoots, if he shoots, things of that nature. So once you kill the Swarmak, you're just going to bolt to the LZ, use salvo shots to kill juvies that are trailing you, and then pull the lever and then tap the salvo. Don't spam because you need it for the whole LZ situation. Now the LZ, the doors take, I don't know if I touched on it yet, but the doors take about 30 seconds to close, okay? So if it takes 30 seconds to close, you need the 30 seconds when you're in the situation is a lot of time for things to go wrong. So you need to be very, very smart with how you use your salvo shots, when you use your frag grenades, when you use your ultimate. You need to be very, very smart and very, very careful, because master escape is there's not much forgiveness. There's not much leeway. So you just have to say to yourself, I got to be perfect or I'm probably going to lose. When it comes down to salvo shots, you just tap it to kill the either it's going to be elite grenadiers, it's definitely going to be juvies, elite snipers, and things of that nature. And you're going to get your ult again from all the damage. Pop your ult one more time, and that should be it, really. So that is my analysis of Clayton, Solo, and the Gatekeepers. One thing that's very important as far as trigger points, and this goes for all maps, but this one specifically, if you pass a doorway, you trigger the other enemies, but the idea you want to do is trigger the enemies, whether it's the Scions, the mini-bosses before the safe room, the Snatcher or Matriarch. You want to trigger them before you pass the doorway, because if you pass the doorway and trigger them, you're going to invite the boss and everything else. And you want to just focus on the bosses, or the gatekeepers, I should say, isolated. You want to focus on them by themselves. And it's a lot easier to deal with. Like when I was dealing with the Swarmak, I wasn't also dealing with elite grenadiers and elite drones. It was just me and the Swarmak. So it's a lot easier to singular focus on the one gatekeeper or 2 gatekeepers before going to the next section, as opposed to focusing on like 10 juvies, a Swarmak, and 3 elite drones. That's harder than just one Swarmak. So that's pretty much it, guys. Thank you so much for 1,000 views. This allowed me an opportunity to figure out, this video. If you like this style of video, give me some comments below. If you have any recommendations on how this video should be or should not be, please give me feedback, positive or otherwise. This is my first time doing it this way, and I'm extremely open to hearing anything you guys have to say so I can be better going forward in making these types of voiceover videos, because it's about you guys getting better, and hopefully we all can get better together. So thank you so much again for 1,000 views on that video. I appreciate it, and stay tuned for the next video. You guys have a good one. Peace.